Hello everyone and welcome. It's a really great honour to be here today at Paratesol and to open this wonderful conference that you're having. Last time I gave a talk at Paratesol conference was over 30 years ago, so I'm very excited to be here supporting the development of educational practice in my beloved Paraguay. My name is Peter Short and I'm a teacher at Wellington Primary School in Hounslow on the outskirts of London. I lead there on educational research and thinking schools. We have been a thinking school for over 12 years, and metacognition lies at the heart of our own practice. We hold an advanced accreditation from Exeter University as a thinking school, and we've also worked very closely with an organisation called Thinking Matters. Here's the front screen. Now, Thinking Matters is one of the leading organisations for metacognitive teaching, both here in the UK and around the world. Some of the material I will share with you today was developed through the work of Thinking Matters, and I am indebted to their Director of Training, Teresa Williams, for her wonderful ideas on today's topic. Please do check out their website at thinkingmatters.com. So here's the overview of today. Today I'll be going through the following with you, but in many regards it will be a bit of a whistle-stop tour of some really important topics. But if you have any further questions or need more details or support, please contact the organisers, and through them we can start a dialogue. I will start with a brief discussion on the importance of developing metacognitive skills in our pupils and what metacognitive classroom really is and how we should look to ourselves to become cognitive coaches. I will introduce you to Habits of Mind, 16 intelligent learning behaviours that were researched by Art Costa and Ben Akalik, and then explore a few activities on how we can introduce them to our pupils. We will then consider how Habits of Mind can be a very helpful tool in planning and thinking in the classroom, and I will go through an example of my own practice in preparation for a lesson. And finally, we can use Habits of Mind as we turn to our classrooms slowly following the impact of COVID-19 in our countries. So what is metacognition and why is it such a big deal? The general definition of metacognition is thinking about thinking, to reflect on our thinking process. But I want to delve deeper into this today as a concept with you. For me, metacognition goes beyond a starting point of reflection. It requires us to consider goals, to be able to plan, monitor, and evaluate our own progress towards these goals. It asks us to be consciously aware of the strategies that we can use to make progress and to adopt the appropriate strategy at the appropriate time. But why is this important for our students? Well, firstly, there are numerous studies showing the positive impact of metacognition on the academic process. The highly respected Education Endowment Fund here in the UK has recently shown it to be amongst the most powerful and cost-effective of interventions, and one that adds up to 7 months to each learner's progress. But for me, the most important role is in how it empowers our students with the ability to deal with an ever-changing world. Nothing in my life prepared me for the impact of COVID-19. And I'm having to adapt in so many ways to meet the challenges that it presents. Going back to a time when I was living in Paraguay, nothing could have prepared me for the internet or the impact of social media. I ask students these days what they would like as a career, and the concept of being a YouTuber or an influencer was totally beyond anything I could have imagined 15 years ago. The world is changing. We don't know what our students will need to know in 10, 20 or 30 years' time. So let's provide them with the skills and the abilities to think effectively, to problem solve, to be aware of the reflective practices that will support them in this very fast changing world. We need to create a culture where metacognition is valued and where teachers nurture metacognitive learners. It is through us that the students will be armed with the minds and the mindsets to succeed in this fast changing future. To do this, we have to review our practice as teachers. We need to become what Thinking Matters refer to as the cognitive coach. Consider the role of the sports coach, one that sets challenges, watches the practice, and then steps in to make a suggestion, asking questions and guiding the pupils to improve their practice. The cognitive coach needs to know how to teach little by little, build up thinking capacity, listen intently, and ask purposeful questions. We need to be able to provide specific feedback and provide and encourage our pupils to solve challenging problems. And the cognitive coach can make use of habits of mind to support their developments of the metacognition in our pupils. So what are habits of mind? Now, I realize many of you have come across them before, but I will start with an introduction. And here we are. Cast your eyes over all 16 and perhaps settle on one or two of those you're familiar with. Habits of mind came out of a study by Art Costa and Ben Akalik, where they researched into what differentiated an effective from less effective learning and identified these 16 habits of mind or intelligent learning behaviors. And they apply equally to young children, teenagers, and adults. What is so wonderful about habits of mind is they are basic, concrete, and accessible to all children. And there's a quote from Art Costa. It's no wonder that habits of mind makes so much sense. They represent what we have been looking for in our students, and they provide a common language and vision for what we would like our students to become as they go through the educational process. Please do check out some of Art Costa's amazing videos on YouTube. Habits of mind are common sense. To a teacher, the language and the areas they include are part of our lives. Of course, we encourage our pupils to be persistent and to stick with a challenging problem, to work together to solve problems. Good teachers use humor in our lessons to encourage children to be creative and to be as accurate in their work as possible. The list goes on. It's what good teachers have been doing throughout history. Habits of mind is not rocket science, it's teaching. But I do find it so useful to have them organized into one device that reminds me of the important things I should be promoting in my classroom. But it is, however, important to establish a point about habits of mind. As Art Costa says, habits of mind don't readily lend themselves to instructional recipes. As Damien Barnes writes, in Habits of Mind Across the Curriculum, 2009, we are not looking at a how-to list. The last thing we need to do is borrow someone else's how-to list. We should be creating wonderful lessons that aim for our pupils to achieve masteries in these behaviors through constant repetition, so they become part of what they do and what they are. And of course, as we see here, Art Costa identifies metacognition as a key practice of effective learning, and I believe that it flows through all of our work. So those of you who are familiar with habits of mind know that they don't work in isolation, but are in play together. So for example, if you are focused on number 11, creating and imagining and innovating, you would no doubt be calling upon number 4, thinking flexibly, and possibly number 10, gathering data from all senses. Let's look at how we can explore a couple of these areas with our students through a range of activities, starting with listening and understanding with empathy. Now, of course, people will say that pupils do listen to each other and they listen to teachers all the time. But here we are talking about listening profoundly for deeper understanding. This is the listening game, and it works for all age ranges and teaching concepts. To work through this example, I'm going to be using the opportunity of exploring what life has been like during the pandemic restrictions. Pupils work in pairs in the role of the listener or the teller. In round 1, the teller describes a typical day in lockdown in sequence. It could be something else if you were teaching maths, for example. Then the second child repeats it back to them what they've heard verbatim as far as possible. Now in round 2, it can be done immediately or at a later occasion, the pupil talks about one memorable event during lockdown. An example would be baking a cake or family setting up a paddling pool in the back garden. This time, the partner paraphrases why they think it was memorable to the speaker. At this point, we can see that they are starting to listen in different ways for different purposes. And in round 3, the teller says why somebody or something they love is very important to them. This time, the partner reflects back to the teller warmly why they felt that person or that thing was so important. And they talk about loving somebody or something and share an open conversation with shared understanding. Now, as for the cognitive coach, this could provide you with an opportunity to drill down further. Following the listening activity, ask your pupils to complete these sentences. Most of the time I felt, some of the time I felt, I never felt. However you do it, the role of the cognitive coach is to provide an encouragement to talk with your fellow pupils and teachers in more depth. Always listening, and when listening with understanding and empathy. This is another nice device. It's called the Q Matrix, and it could be a great opportunity. It's by Spencer Kagan, and this is a great tool to help language and reflective skills. This allows the pupils and the students to carefully construct their questions through the grid. You could have your pupils filling in the box with a range of questions in each area you're exploring. There are countless ways that you can do it. I mean, one secondary teacher used this to ask her pupils to design the questions that they should ask her at the end of the lesson. Let's look at another area quickly now of thinking flexibly. One of the first things we can do when we're working with habits of mind is to establish meaning, because if we can't name it and explain it, then we'll never be able to do it. So, what do we mean when we say we're thinking flexibly? In this activity, you could have one group detail when people think flexibly and the other group to highlight the opposite. What's the opposite of thinking flexibly? You could move on to a card sorting activity where they try and identify which of these things is thinking flexibly and not thinking flexibly. And you could have some amazing discussions for like making a fuss. Is it right to make a fuss or not? And through that, we can use the Y frame. It's another nice device. And we can use this for a range of things. What does it sound like? What does it look like? What does it feel like? When is it appropriate to use? When is it inappropriate to use? You can see here that if we were talking about making a fuss, is it sometimes the right thing to make a fuss, or is it inappropriate to be making a fuss at this time? So here are some cognitive coach questions for thinking flexibly. What are you actually doing when you're being flexible? How do you monitor yourself as you find new ways to think? What will you be doing to contribute to a classroom that places thinking flexibly as important? The cognitive coach should be monitoring for the key words and repeating back the words and linking it to metacognition, and making the pupils aware that they're working with habits of mind. The first part of the presentation so far was a quick burst of ideas on how a range of class-based activities can be used to work with habits of mind. At this point, I would like to shift the focus and share part of my journey as a teacher with habits of mind through the development of one particular series of lessons. I remember when I first looked at habits of mind and I saw moments of awe and wonder, and it stood out for me. Many of my best lessons included a moment of awe and wonder with the children, because I like to use drama techniques in my lessons. We like to use our imagination in the class to change the class into a jungle or a desert island. We provide an opportunity to interview characters from books, to shape our bodies into living pictures. And I started to look back over my plans in the light of habits of mind, and I could see over and over again how my lessons addressed the implementation of habits of mind. It jumped out at me from the page, understanding with empathy, seeing a person's problem from another point of view, taking responsible risks, acting as someone other than our own selves. Thinking back on my lessons, I could see that I was using it, and had been for many years, and it was embedded in my most favorite lessons. In our school, there is a section planning that we have where we include always some Bloom's taxonomy questions. And I have a board above my planning desk to help me keep focused on including higher order thinking. What if I did that with habits of mind and made it integral to my thinking process? And that's where sorry about the delay here. And that's where I came up with this analogy. Go with me on this one. Imagine habits of mind as an artist's paint palette. The teacher, whilst planning for their lessons or adapting past planning, will use habits of mind to add a range of colour to the basic line drawing. Like an artist, the picture might not need all the colours of the palette, but they are not able to paint without dipping their brush into the palette and choosing the colour to make the picture rich and special. Of course, it still depended on the artist to create the picture. And knowing some of my lessons, I nearly ended up with a Jackson Pollock, even if I was aiming to make a Turner. But my challenge was to try and put this into practice. How could I use habits of mind as a toolbox for planning? I decided to test my theory by painting the most vibrant picture I could. I planned a series of interconnected lessons over 1 week that provided an opportunity for habits of mind to be explored. The picture might be too bright, it might end up like a Jackson Pollock, but what the hell? Habits of mind tells us to take considered risks, and that's what I did. And of course, it would involve changing the classroom to an imaginary place. In developing the lesson itself, I was going to be important that it was dynamic, carefully planned, with a series of lessons that would pose challenging problems and be fun to teach. And we can see this through the quote of Art Costa. Please read through that. At this time, I was teaching year 6, that's 10 to 11-year-olds in the UK. And I chose a series of literacy lessons, English lessons. I started by examining my main learning intention. And I had a problem. My class were really focused on improving their writing skills, and they needed to support on developing their emotional literacy. Many of their stories were clear and to the point, but they failed to engage with the reader, and with the feelings of the characters, with the emotions that were going on. They lacked depth of engagement, and their writing tasks were very dry. While this was prevalent, particularly in the boys' writing, it also affected many of my top-performing girl writers as well. At the time, we were using Street Child by Burley Doherty as our class text, and we've been basing our literacy lesson around this as a set text. Street Child, is a story of a boy called Jim, who is left to survive on the streets of Victorian London after he ran away from the workhouse following the death of his mother. It is based upon one of the real stories of a child that prompted Dr. Bernardo to start his ragged schools and look after street children in Victorian times. In the first lesson, the pupils were asked to create a character of a poor Victorian child living on the streets, with the details including their age and life expectations and experiences. Using Roll on the Wall, as I'm showing you here, as a frame for their own reflection, and we've used this this tool with the class before recently, when we were examining Jim, the main character in Street Child. They use the roll on the wall and they examine both the internal perspectives of the character and how others see them from the external perspective. In lesson 2, pupils use their character to take on a role in the drama that takes place in Fagins Den, the gang leader from Dickens' Oliver Twist. The den was especially created in one of our outreach rooms. The room is small and different to their classrooms, and it was pre-set up and arranged to look like a criminal den, dark with Victorian-style lamps and a roaring fire in one of the corners of the room. It was actually a computer monitor where we had your fireplace in your home on Netflix running. Hunks of bread and cheese and a bowl of apples were set about the room. The teacher in role as Fagin, not myself, let the pupils into the den on following a secret knock and checked that they weren't followed. Some of the pupils had previously been supplied with artifacts, and they presented their stolen goods to Fagin: a pocket watch, Victorian pound note, and a silk handkerchief. For these children, they were rewarded with food and promises of sleeping near the fire. Other children were threatened with being kicked out on the streets if they didn't start thieving properly. So new children were spotted, and they were provided with instructions of what to look for in their new jobs, and provided with a tasty apple. There would be time spent exploring the drama with the pupils, and they were finally asked to sleep. The pupils exited the room using conscious alley, with each of the pupils whispering to their advice, played by one pupil who moved down the corridor. Now, a wide range of habits of mind for these part of lessons were developed, from responding with awe and wonder, gathering data through our senses, creating and imagining, innovating, taking responsible risks, and thinking flexibly. Back in the classroom, we held a plenary to discuss their feelings and their responses to the drama. Pupils created a sequence frame from the day that their child, when they woke up after the night at Fagins Den. In later lessons, we explored some real-life cases of Victorian child criminals. And then the pupils finally went on to some writing about the day in their life of their own Victorian street childs. This lesson was built on HOM strategies, and the list is quite considerable. But all the pupils had a real sense of awe and wonder. Okay, let's have a look at some of the outcomes of the pupils' work from their writing. And this, as I said, this girl was a good writer, but for this work, she really became really good and explored emotional depth, much more detail than she had ever done before. And reading through these, I was often quite moved by them. But the boy vanished into a crowd of men in top hats. Thomas felt tears dribbling down his face. That was his dinner gone. Just then he felt a hand grip on his shoulder tightly. He spun round and found himself staring into the cold eyes of a policeman who was grinning. "Got you now, haven't I, boy? Off to the workhouse for you. There they'll teach you why it's bad to steal." A big difference in her writing. And then let's go to an example of this is a boy who always wrote just plain sentences, and there was no detail in it. Charlie couldn't sleep. He was thinking about his mother and he cried. Tears dripped down his eyes, but he knew he had to man up. He had to do this not only for himself, but his father, mother, and Philip. He moved around and then began to sleep. Philip wanted to tell Charlie his secret, but he didn't want to hurt him. But he was going to do it out of love. He shut his eyes, waiting for the next day to come. Finally, I'll just read you the top part of this because I'm really impressed with it. It really showed me how important it was to use these habits of mind and to try an exciting moment of awe and wonder in my lessons, because the pupils really developed an inner monologue for these children. They followed him into a shack near a dark alleyway. Hetty was screaming with happiness on the inside, but calm and serious on the outside. The shack was planks of scuffed wood nailed together, and on a broken chair was a piece of matured cheddar. Millie knew it was for them. She picked it up and broke off a generous piece for Hetty and nibbled it like there was no tomorrow. These are 10-year-olds writing, 10-year-olds. So it's quite impressive. Following the lesson, I did ask the pupils to complete a habit of mind reflection sheet and map out the habits of mind that they thought that they were using throughout this experience. I had introduced the 16 habits of mind previously to the class, and I asked them to reflect on and think on their activities during the lesson. I am honest and open with my pupils, and I'm clear on how I go about planning, and I discussed that how I used, in this case, habits of mind to plan. It's very joyous teaching upper key stage 2, I can tell you. Here are a few examples of the reflections of the pupils. And I don't usually like reading from the PowerPoint, but this is really good. When I was writing the several drafts, this is persisting. When I was writing the several drafts before my hot task, that's their main piece of writing, I realized that each time I got something wrong, I had to keep trying to make my work better. The child picked that up as part of their lesson. Creating, imagining, innovating. In the Victorian drama, I had to imagine that I was an actual street child, that I had been newly adopted. But by doing this, I was able to understand what it was like being a street child, and for taking responsible risks. I like this one. In the content of my hot task, I took a risk to use Cockney slang language in my hot task. I also realised that sometimes I had to break the literature techniques to write successfully. I hope that by taking you through this specific lesson in detail and showing you the results, I've shared with you how it is possible to utilise habits of mind to create very special lessons for our pupils. And so, let's move on to my final part of the presentation, how we can use habits of mind to support pupils in their return to the classroom after the COVID-19 lockdown. In this section, I want to share with you the experiences of Wellington Primary as a thinking school, and how we are particularly supporting our pupils back to school through the habits of mind. I will go through some of the thoughts behind the development of this program and share some examples of the program. It's designed for Key Stage 1 to Key Stage 2. So that's 4, 5 and 6, up to 10 and 11-year-olds. And then I'm going to share a couple of pupils' responses, and importantly, talk to you about how the approach was used to support the staff development as cognitive coaches. Firstly, we wanted to provide the pupils with an opportunity to explore with each child their individual stories, their journey during lockdown, and their journey coming back to school. And we would explore these the selected number of habits of mind, dispositions as we're calling them here, identified through asking the pupils, and they were asked to consider each one of these dispositions through 3 lenses: themselves, their life at home, and outside. Those 3 perspectives. We wanted to highlight that their learning development did not stop because they were not at school. They were using and exploring these habits of mind throughout the lockdown, and they continue to do so as we take the next steps in coming back to school. We are facilitating their awareness of their learning and reflecting on their development of these skills. We're teaching them to become metacognitive. First of all, let's look at a series of slides from the Key Stage 1 program. This is for the little ones. And I'd like to introduce you to a very important character, Bertie the bee. And this is Bertie the bee. We invited the pupils to explore these points about Bertie the bee and these 3 concepts. And we were going to choose these dispositions for Bertie. We were going to choose persistence, managing impulsivity. All of these are from habits of mind. Working with others, being creative, and thinking about our thinking. And we were going to look at it through the experiences of the life of Bertie the bee. I want to move my little picture away, move it slightly, so you can actually see what I'm saying. There we go. So we were looking through the life of Bertie the bee, and we were thinking about what it must be like, how busy it must be in a beehive, and what the life Bertie the bee has to go through. And the first one we're going to look at is was persistence. And we asked the pupils to think about persistence, and we gave them a model, we gave them an idea, a story that they could follow. And Bertie the bee was going, look at all those flowers. Poor Bertie the bee, he's got to collect nectar from all of them. And we talked to the pupils about the importance of sticking to a task, following a job through until it's done, and staying on the task. And asked them to think about a time they remained persistent and achieved something that they found hard. And then how did the people at their home remain persistent? And outside of their homes, how did they see persistence as important? And could they see it all the way around? And that discussion with the pupils was really, really helpful and very useful. And we had lots of interesting ideas from them about, one of the children came up with an idea about, we had to queue at the supermarket, but we had to be very patient and stick with it. And it took a while to get, when we were at the supermarket, to get our food. Here's a comment from one of the one of the children in year 2, at 5 and 6. I think this child was 5. And this says here, I did stick at my homework. I completed the task, but he did need a little bit of help from his mum. So that is the teacher in full cognitive coach mode, getting a discussion about, oh, how did you deal with your homework, and what things did you think about when you were doing your homework? And here we can see another one. This is managing impulsivity. Poor Bertie, poor Bertie. He's seen an ice cream dropped on the floor by a human. Oh, Bertie loves ice creams. But he still has a job to do. He has to collect all the flower from the nectar from the flowers. Oh dear, what should he do? And for children that age, the discussion about managing impulsivity is so very, very important. And we want them to consider consider the options, to think before they act, or how can they control their emotions. And this is an important discussion that we should be having with little children, and seeing it through the eyes of Bertie the bee. And finally here, oh, what a busy day, and the final example I'm giving you today, what a busy day Bertie the bee has had. He's flying home, he's very tired, but he's been thinking about all the things that happened, and whether he made the best choices. Maybe tomorrow he'll do things differently. And this is really important, that we're working with these 5-year-olds, and we're asking them to think about their thinking. Oh, would you do something differently tomorrow? How would you approach that problem? How would you work on that situation if we went into lockdown again, or when you come back to school? How would you deal with it? Metacognition for 5-year-olds. We're using the story to help us with this. This next slide shows how I moved into working with year 6. We're going to be rolling this out to the whole of Key Stage 2 this year. Each sector that we have focuses on one particular area of habits of mind. We've chosen these, but you could choose the ones that are important to you. But each one is for myself, the people around me at my home, and then outside in school, or as we return into normality. And we ask the pupils in each sector and just to concentrate and focus and to write quality thoughts on each of those sectors. And we don't have to rush it through. We can take our time and ask the pupils to work through each area one after the other. And here we see an example of a quote taken from a year 6 pupil. And it's here that we can see how his approach and has supported, his comments have supported the teacher in their approach as a cognitive coach. This task is not intended to be an exercise that to be completed by the pupil and then it's done. It's a tool. It's a tool to prompt discussion and development, and to explore the development with the individual. Response for the pupil will be a starting point of what the discussion with the teacher to explore out what happened. As we can see here, the child decided to make a chocolate cake, and they had the wrong type of flour, and they realized that they didn't have the right type of flour. Now, I don't know what it was like in Latin America, but in England, flour was as a premium, and nobody could get flour from the shops. But that was a wonderful discussion that the teacher was able to have with the pupil. Was the lack of flour because of lockdown? What did you do to solve it? How would the situation be different after lockdown had finished? And how would it be now? Does it mean you can get all the flour you want? Or how are you going to think about when you're going to solve it? What does it mean for you? So as Art Costa talks about habits of mind, it's not there creating an instructional recipe or a how-to list. We should be looking to utilize habits of mind through a big wide range of approaches and activities. In developing our practice, we want to think about what suits the needs of our pupils. And I encourage you to look at this rubric and provide opportunity, if you can, to consider pupils' emotional responses. Look at the experiences and activities and ask them to think about their world from a range of perspectives. In the past, where we are now, or the future, or as I did, myself, my home, the outside, or other perspectives that are relevant to your pupils' needs. Habit of mind provides us with a lens that we can use to facilitate discussion and reflections and improve our role as a cognitive coach. Always bear in mind that our central goal is to provide an opportunity for metacognition. So, my final thoughts. My final thoughts today are all about you. You are here at the Paratesol conference, learning about a range of teaching approaches and experiencing from a wide range of fascinating speakers over these next 2 days. And you've shown me the courtesy of giving your time today and listening about teaching and metacognition. Question is, do you feel you're part of something special? You should feel special because you are here being proactive. You want to become the best teacher you can. And that's because all of you are agents of change. All educators involved in the movement towards the teaching of the child as the whole child are agents of change. Committing to supporting pupils' understanding that the mind is a tool to face an uncertain future means that we, us, are the risk takers, the reflective practitioners, the facilitators, the creators of inspirational lessons that pupils will reflect on for years to come. We choose to make a difference, to improve the educational opportunities for all. We're the agents of change. So, thank you very, very much for listening today. And remember, be the agent of change. Thank you.